What are you demanding for? Are you out of your mind? Mayor Seaman Frederick barked, his voice cutting through the tense silence. The question rang out sharply, the weight of disbelief in his words thickening the air. He stared at Carl Lois, leader of the HOA gang, as though trying to understand how a man like him could dare walk into his office and make such an absurd request. Carl, unmoved, stood with an eerie calm, his cold eyes scanning the mayor's office as if he owned the place. He took a leisurely step forward, his dark suit hanging off his frame like a shadow. His two henchmen, standing behind him, were the kind of men you wouldn't want to meet in an alley. They were silent but exuded a raw, dangerous energy. Carl's lips curled into a mock smile. "I'm not asking for permission, Frederick," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "I'm demanding it." Frederick's jaw clenched, the weight of the moment settling in his bones. He had dealt with men like Carl before, men who thought they could push others around with force, fear, and threats. But Frederick wasn't afraid. Not of this. "I know what you're asking for," Frederick said, his tone firm. "But I'm not stupid enough to give you the green light to poison this city." Carl took a step closer, his eyes narrowing as he observed Frederick with a cold calculation. "Poison," he repeated, his voice low. "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think? We're just talking about burning some chemicals, Frederick. Nothing dangerous. Unless, of course, you don't want to make any money." Frederick stood up from his desk, his fists clenching at his sides. "Don't play games with me, Carl," he snapped. "This isn't just about money. You're talking about setting up a factory that will kill thousands, and I won't be a part of that. Not now, not ever." For a moment, there was silence in the room, broken only by the sound of Frederick's heavy breathing. Carl took another step forward, his smile fading into something darker, more threatening. "You don't understand, Frederick," Carl said, his voice now a quiet, dangerous growl. "This isn't just about the factory. This is about power, control, who runs this city. And you think you can just stand in my way without consequences." Frederick didn't flinch. "I'm not afraid of you," he said, his voice steady but firm. "And you'll never have my approval for this." Carl's eyes flicked to his two men, who had been silently waiting for a cue. In an instant, they closed the distance, grabbing Frederick's guards and pushing them aside like rag dolls. One of Carl's men lunged at Frederick, grabbing him by the collar and slamming him into the wall with a sickening thud. Frederick's breath was knocked from his lungs, but his eyes were fire. "Is this your answer?" he spat, his voice hoarse. "You're going to try to bully me into submission." Carl's men closed in around him, but Frederick wasn't done. With a quick movement, he drove his elbow into the gut of the man holding him, knocking the wind out of him. The thug staggered back, but before Frederick could react, Carl was in his face, a cool smirk plastered across his face. "You're not leaving here in one piece, Frederick," Carl hissed. He grabbed Frederick's wrist and twisted it, sending a jolt of pain through the mayor's arm. "You should have known better than to stand in my way." Frederick growled, his other hand swinging up to connect with Carl's ribs, forcing him back. But Carl was faster. With a fluid motion, he kicked Frederick's legs out from under him, sending him crashing to the floor. "You're weak, Frederick," Carl sneered, "and this city will burn for your refusal." Frederick struggled to get up, his body aching, his mind clouded with rage. Blood dripped from a cut above his eyebrow, but his fury burned brighter than the pain. He pushed himself to his feet, eyes fixed on Carl with a resolve stronger than steel. "This isn't over," Frederick hissed, wiping the blood from his brow. "You won't get away with this." Carl laughed, the sound cold and cruel. "You should have thought about that before you tried to be a hero. This is my city now. You're just a man who can't keep up." As Carl turned to leave, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. "When I come back, Frederick, I won't ask again." His words were a low, threatening promise. The door slammed shut, leaving Frederick standing there, his heart pounding, his body bruised but not broken. He knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something much darker. Later that night, the city was rocked by an explosion so loud that it seemed to shake the entire skyline. Frederick stood frozen by the window, staring out at the rising smoke and flames in the distance. His breath caught in his throat as his worst fear became a reality. His mansion, His home. No. Frederick whispered, his hands clenching fists at his sides. The fire reflected in his eyes as his mind raced. He didn't need anyone to tell him who was responsible. He could already hear Carl's voice in his head, mocking him. You made a mistake, Frederick. The words echoed, and Frederick knew it was just the beginning. He grabbed his phone, dialing his most trusted aide. Mr. Mayor, it's bad. The voice on the other end was frantic. They've attacked your house. Your families. Frederick didn't need to hear more. Where are they? His voice was sharp, urgent. They are at the mansion. We've tried to. But Frederick wasn't listening anymore. His mind was consumed with a singular thought, revenge. The flames continued to rage in the distance, the smoke rising higher, as Frederick stared out into the night. His fists clenched, his heart a furnace of anger and determination. This is far from over. Carl, Frederick muttered to himself, his voice a deadly promise. You've made a grave mistake, and I'm going to make sure you regret it. The fire still raged in the distance, casting an eerie glow over the city's skyline. Frederick stood frozen, his fists clenched at his sides, eyes fixated on the inferno. The flames reflected in his gaze, flickering like a cool reminder of what Carl Lois had done. He couldn't breathe, not because of the smoke or the chaos around him, but because of the weight pressing down on his chest. His home, everything he had worked for, was now reduced to ashes. His family, his life, all of it could have been gone in an instant. But there was something else burning inside him now, something far stronger than the pain. It was rage. It was vengeance. His phone buzzed in his hand, snapping him out of his trance. He answered without hesitation. What's the situation? His voice was cold, sharper than a blade. Mr. Mayor. The voice on the other end was frantic, barely holding itself together. Your family's safe. They're... Frederick's heart skipped a beat. What do you mean they're safe? How? The guards, sir. They managed to get them out. But we've lost the mansion. It's gone. It's completely destroyed. Frederick's grip tightened around the phone. He could feel the heat in his chest, threatening to boil over. His mansion had always been his fortress, his sanctuary. His family's safety was paramount. Yet, here it was, shattered in front of him. But there was more. Where's Carl? Frederick demanded. The line was silent for a moment. We've got word. He's in the city. He's not done with you yet, Mr. Mayor. He wants more. Frederick's eyes narrowed, fury bubbling beneath the surface. What do you mean he wants more? What more could that man possibly want? A chemical factory. Frederick is going to burn the city down if we don't give him what he wants. Frederick's breath caught. He felt the blood in his veins freeze over for a split second. How much time do we have? He asked, his voice almost a whisper. Not long. He's making his move tonight. The line went dead. Frederick stood there for a moment, his thoughts racing, trying to piece together the chaos around him. His mind was running 1,000 miles a minute, but there was only one thing that mattered now. Carl was coming for the city. Frederick paced back and forth, his mind consumed by the weight of what was coming. He couldn't let Carl win. He couldn't let the city fall under his control. Not after everything he had built, not after everything he had lost. His door swung open, and his top aide, Lucas, walked in, face pale with fear. Sir, it's bad. Really bad, Lucas said, his voice trembling. What is it? Frederick's voice was sharp, like a crack of thunder in the tense silence. Lucas handed him a stack of papers, each one more damning than the last. We've got intel, sir. Carl's got allies. The underworld's working with him. He's made deals with people you would never have thought possible. Frederick's eyes scanned the papers quickly, his heart sinking deeper with every word. I knew it, he muttered under his breath, rubbing his temples. He's not just a gang leader. He's building an empire, and I've been standing in the way. He's not stopping. He's already gone to other officials. He's got their support. If we don't act fast, we might lose everything. Frederick clenched his jaw. We'll take action, but we need to hit him where it hurts. Not just his business, but his ego. We'll make him wish he never crossed me. He turned to Lucas with a determined look in his eyes. "Prepare the team. We go after him tonight." Later that night, as the city lay shrouded in darkness, Frederick made his way through a hidden back door into an underground facility. The air was thick with tension. His guards, silently patrolling the area, kept their weapons close, ready for anything. But Frederick's mind was far from the weapons in his hands. It was on Carl. He had to outsmart him, outmaneuver him, hit him where it would hurt most. Carl wasn't just a gangster anymore. He was an enemy of the people, and Frederick wasn't going to let him destroy everything he had worked for. They reached a large steel door, and Frederick's heart pounded in his chest. Behind that door lay everything he needed to stop Carl's plan. He nodded to Lucas, who pulled out a set of keys. The door creaked open, revealing a hidden lab, the hum of machinery filling the air. Frederick's eyes immediately locked onto the large vats, the chemicals inside glowing ominously. The lab was a ticking time bomb, a silent witness to the destruction Carl had planned for the city. "So this is it," Frederick whispered to himself, his hand resting on the cold surface of the nearest container. He turned to Lucas, his face hardening. "We need to destroy this. Everything. We can't let Carl use this to destroy the city." Lucas nodded, his face grim. "You sure about this, sir? If we blow this up, it'll be a statement. But we're making an enemy of everyone in Carl's circle." Frederick didn't hesitate. "We're already enemies. Lucas. We don't have a choice." As Frederick and his team set the charges, the ground trembled beneath them. It was a low, ominous rumble, one that sent a chill through Frederick's spine. "He knows," Frederick whispered. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. "He knows," Frederick repeated, his voice cold with resolve. Carl's voice rang out from the shadows. "I thought you might try something like this, Frederick." Frederick spun around, his heart racing as Carl stepped into view, his smile twisted in satisfaction. Behind him, his men were closing in, their eyes filled with malice. "You really think you can stop me?" Carl sneered, stepping closer. "You can't even protect your own home, let alone the city." Frederick's pulse quickened, but he stood tall, his fists clenched. "You've made a mistake, Carl. The city is stronger than you think, and I'm going to make sure you burn with it." Carl's eyes darkened, and for the first time, Frederick saw something other than confidence in his gaze, a flicker of doubt. "We'll see about that," Carl muttered. In that moment, Frederick knew one thing for sure. This wasn't just a fight for the city. This was personal. The stage was set, the battle lines drawn. But Frederick knew Carl wasn't the kind of man who could be beaten easily. The war was just beginning, and the stakes had never been higher. Frederick's breath came in short, jagged bursts, the taste of iron in his mouth from the cut on his lip. The streets were chaos, the smoke from the explosion still rising into the night sky. He could hear the distant sirens, the screams, but none of that mattered. His city was under attack. His life, his career, was on the line, and Carl Lois was standing in the middle of it all. "What the hell do you think you're doing, Frederick?" Carl's voice was like poison, dripping with contempt as he stood with his arms crossed, watching Frederick with an almost bored expression. "You really think you can just walk in here and stop this? You're too late." Frederick clenched his fists, his mind racing. The taste of the fight was still fresh in his blood from earlier, but this was bigger than just a personal vendetta. This was the life of the city at stake. And Frederick wasn't about to let some goddamn criminal think he owned it. "I'm not afraid of you, Carl," Frederick spat, stepping forward, his every step fueled by raw fury. His fists were aching from the fight with Carl's men, but his will was stronger than ever. He wasn't going down without blood. Carl chuckled, the sound cold, unsettling. "You think you can fight me? You think you can stop the tide of everything I've built?" He took a step forward, his boots crushing the glass from the windows nearby. "You're out of your depth, Frederick." Frederick lunged at him. The gunshots, the chaos, the fear, it didn't matter. He could feel the heat of his anger rising like fire, and he slammed his shoulder into Carl, knocking him off balance. "You're not getting away with this," Frederick growled, his voice low, lethal. Carl staggered but regained his footing, eyes darkening. He was faster than Frederick had anticipated, quicker than the other men Frederick had faced before. With a sick grin, Carl swung a fist, and Frederick barely managed to dodge it, feeling the whoosh of air as it passed by. But Carl was already on him again, using his weight and strength to his advantage. He slammed his elbow into Frederick's ribs, forcing the wind from his lungs. Frederick grunted, stumbling back, but he didn't stop. He was done playing games. It was time to end this. Frederick's fury boiled over, and he grabbed a piece of broken metal from the ground. His hand tightened around it, his knuckles white, before he swung it at Carl with all the strength he could muster. The blow landed against Carl's arm with a sickening thud, and Carl roared in pain, clutching his arm as Frederick drove a makeshift weapon into his gut. The impact knocked the wind out of Carl, and for a moment, Frederick thought he might have won. But Carl wasn't done yet. With a savage growl, he threw Frederick off of him and landed a brutal punch to his jaw. Frederick's head snapped back, and he stumbled, vision blurring. Blood trickled from his lip, but he didn't care. He could feel the adrenaline surging through his veins like wildfire, the heat of rage blinding him to the pain. Frederick wiped the blood from his mouth, his eyes locking onto Carl's. He wasn't going to stop now. Not when it was this close. Not when Carl had taken everything from him. "You think you're the only one who's dangerous," Frederick said, his voice low and deadly. "I've fought harder battles than this, and I'm still standing. You're nothing compared to the storm I'm about to bring." Carl sneered, but his smug expression faltered for just a second. "You're just a man, Frederick. I'm a goddamn empire." "Not anymore," Frederick shot back, stepping forward with a renewed fury, his breath coming in ragged gasps. Before Carl could react, Frederick swung the metal shard again, slashing it across Carl's face. The sharp edge cut deep into his skin, and Carl staggered back, cursing. Blood streamed from the gash, but Frederick didn't relent. He moved forward again, swinging and punching with everything he had, until Carl could no longer keep up. Finally, Frederick landed a crushing blow to Carl's chest, knocking him to the ground. Carl gasped for air, clutching his ribs as Frederick stood over him, fists raised. He wasn't finished. But Carl wasn't done yet either. With a final, desperate gasp, Carl pulled a knife from his belt and slashed it across Frederick's side. Frederick hissed in pain, stumbling back as the blade found its mark. Blood soaked his shirt, but he wasn't done. He couldn't be. With a roar of pain and fury, Frederick lunged at Carl, knocking the knife from his hand and slamming him back against the wall. The crash echoed through the street, and Frederick didn't hesitate. He pinned Carl there, using all his weight to crush him into the brick. "I'll take you down, Carl," Frederick snarled, his voice dripping with venom. "I'll make sure you never get up." Carl's eyes flickered with fear, the smugness finally leaving his face. "You think you're the hero, Frederick," he spat. "You're just a man, and in the end, you'll break just like the rest of them." Frederick's fist came down hard, landing a devastating blow to Carl's face, and the criminal's head slammed back against the brick with a sickening crack. The fight was over, but Frederick's fury wasn't. He stood over Carl, panting, every muscle in his body burning from the fight. Blood dripped from his side, and his clothes were torn, but he was alive, and that was all that mattered. "You've lost, Carl," Frederick whispered through gritted teeth. "This city doesn't belong to you." Frederick turned, walking away as the sirens grew louder, the chaos of the night still swirling around him. The battle was far from over, but for the first time, he felt like he might actually win this fight. Frederick stood over Carl's crumpled body, his chest heaving as blood dripped from his side. The fire in his veins still burned with rage, but it was a cold realization of what he had to do next that made the air feel heavy. This wasn't over, not by a long shot. Carl might be down, but the fight was only just beginning. He wiped the blood from his lip, the cold night air stinging his open wound. The sirens were closer now, the chaos of the streets rushing at him, but Frederick didn't flinch. He stepped away from Carl, the sound of his boots crushing the broken glass beneath him echoing in the silence that followed. The battle had taken its toll on him. His ribs ached, his sides screamed with every movement, but his mind was sharp. He couldn't afford to rest. Not now. There was still the matter of the HOA gang, still the aftermath of the explosion that had turned his life into a war zone. As Frederick walked down the dark alley, the weight of everything began to settle in. His city was on the brink of destruction. The mayor's mansion was reduced to rubble, his family in danger, and the HOA gang had pushed him to the edge. Carl had shown him no mercy. But Frederick wasn't the kind to bend. He wasn't the kind to back down. The night was silent, but Frederick could feel the tension building. His every step felt like the calm before a storm. His phone buzzed in his pocket, and he quickly pulled it out, his hand trembling slightly as he saw the name on the screen. It was Inspector Miller. He swiped to answer, his voice gruff as he spoke. "Frederick." "Where the hell are you, Frederick?" Miller's voice crackled over the line, his tone tight with urgency. "We've got a major problem. You need to come to the precinct. Now." Frederick's heart rate spiked. "What's going on?" "It's bigger than Carl, Frederick. There's something we didn't see coming. The HOA gang, they've got more people in high places than we thought. I'm talking about the city's most influential officials. We've been compromised." Miller's voice dropped to a whisper. "And Frederick, they've got your family." Frederick's blood ran cold. His stomach twisted into a knot. His mind raced as he tried to piece together the words. His family? How had they gotten to them? It was a move so calculated, so deliberate, that Frederick could barely process it. "Where are they?" Frederick demanded, his voice a low growl. "I'm sending you the address. Just get here, Frederick. Now." The line went dead. Frederick's pulse pounded in his ears as he sprinted toward his car. Every thought in his mind screamed at him to move faster, to get to his family before it was too late. He didn't know who was behind it, but he knew this was a final blow, the thing that would break him or make him stronger. The streets blurred as he drove, the darkness around him swallowing the headlights. His knuckles were white on the wheel, his eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, expecting to see shadows tailing him, the HOA gang closing in. But no matter how fast he drove, the tension only grew. When he finally arrived at the address Miller had sent, his stomach twisted in horror. The building was abandoned, the windows shattered, the metal door hanging off its hinges. It looked like something out of a nightmare, and Frederick's gut told him this was it. This was where everything would change. He didn't hesitate. His body moved before his mind could process it. He kicked open the door and entered, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. The walls were graffiti-covered, the floors slick with something he couldn't quite identify. But what caught his attention was the blood-stained sheets in the corner. His heart skipped a beat. And then he saw them. His family, his wife, his children, tied to chairs, bruised and blooded but still alive. "No!" Frederick shouted, his voice cracking with a mix of rage and relief. He rushed toward them, his hands shaking as he cut the ropes binding them. His wife looked at him with tear-filled eyes, her voice weak but filled with fear. "Frederick, they've been watching us the whole time," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They've been tracking your every move. It's not just Carl. They've got someone else behind this. Someone with more power than we can even understand." Frederick's heart skipped a beat. He felt the weight of her words crush him. His worst fears had come true. Carl wasn't the only threat. This was a conspiracy, a game that stretched far beyond the HOA gang. And someone was using Carl as a pawn in a much bigger game. A game Frederick wasn't even aware of until now. He looked back at his family, their faces pale and battered, and in that moment, everything clicked. The destruction, the chaos, the fight, the corruption. They had all been leading up to this. The one thing that could break him completely. And then a voice echoed from the shadows. A voice that sent a cold shiver down Frederick's spine. Well, it looks like you've made it just in time, Frederick." Frederick spun around, his body instinctively going into fight mode. But what he saw was nothing like what he expected. There, standing in the doorway, was Mayor Seaman Frederick's closest ally, Inspector Miller. But his face was different now. Cold, calculated, and his eyes, once filled with concern for Frederick, now held only disdain. "You," Frederick's voice was barely a whisper, "you betrayed me." Miller stepped forward, a dark smile spreading across his face. "I didn't betray you, Frederick. I saved you from making the biggest mistake of your life. You really think you could stop Carl and the HOA gang by yourself? You needed someone with power, someone who could play the game better than you. Frederick felt the ground slip from beneath him. You were behind it all. You were the one pulling the strings. Miller didn't respond immediately. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a file. He dropped it on the floor in front of Frederick, who bent down to look at it. Inside was a blueprint of the entire city, every building, every government office, every street, every alley, all mapped out with precision. Miller, Frederick's voice cracked with disbelief. You've been controlling everything. Oh, Frederick, Miller chuckled darkly. I've been controlling you from the start. The game was never about the city. It was about power, about who would have the strength to control it all. And I've already won. Frederick's heart pounded in his chest, his mind racing. The betrayal was unbearable. Miller had used him, fed him lies, manipulated him, while hiding in plain sight as a trusted ally. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Frederick took a deep breath, his hands shaking with rage. He wasn't going to let this go. He wasn't going to let the city fall to Miller, to the HOA gang, to corruption. And that, right there, was the beginning of the end.